Imagine buying your dream house only to discover it's haunted by a vengeful spirit. This is the story of the House of Nightmares, where a new beginning turns into a real nightmare. Are you ready to hear about the horrors that await in this house? Press play and come with us. The Johnson family was ecstatic. After years of saving, they had finally bought their dream home. It was a beautiful Victorian property located in a picturesque town. With its 3 stories, lush garden, and charming porch, the house seemed perfect. John and Paula, along with their 2 children, Sophie and Peter, couldn't wait to start their new life there. On moving day, the atmosphere was pure joy. The neighbors came to welcome them, praising the house and sharing stories about the friendly community. While unpacking their things, John found an old key under a loose floorboard in the living room. Curious, he kept the key, thinking it might belong to some old cabinet. The first night in the house, everything seemed perfect. The Johnson family had dinner in their new kitchen, laughed, and shared stories about the adventures ahead. After dinner, they all went to their rooms, eager to start the next day. However, what should have been a peaceful night soon turned into something terrifying. In the middle of the night, Sophie woke up scared by a strange noise coming from the hallway. She heard light footsteps and whispering sounds coming from all directions. Frightened, she ran to her parents' room but found the door locked. Desperate, she started banging on the door, shouting for help. John and Paula woke up to their daughter's screams, but when they opened the door, they found no one in the hallway. The next morning, John decided to investigate the attic, where he believed the key might fit. Upon opening the attic door, a wave of cold air hit him. Inside, he found an old, dusty chest. With the key in hand, he opened the chest and found a series of diaries and old newspaper clippings. The pages of the diaries were yellowed and fragile, but the stories contained in them were terrifying. The diaries belonged to a woman named Isabel, who had lived in the house at the end of the 19th century. She described horrifying events, mentioning the presence of a vengeful spirit that haunted the house. According to Isabel, the spirit was of a woman who had been brutally murdered by her jealous husband. The vengeful spirit, unable to find peace, cursed the house, vowing to torment anyone who dared to live there. In the days that followed, the Johnson family began to experience increasingly disturbing events. Lights flickered for no reason, doors slammed shut by themselves, and whispering voices echoed through the hallways at night. Peter, the youngest son, started having recurring nightmares about a woman with empty eyes and a disfigured face. Paula began finding messages written on mirrors and walls, always warning about the vengeance that was to come. The fear and tension inside the house were palpable. The family felt increasingly isolated, with neighbors starting to avoid them, whispering about the curse of the House of Nightmares. Desperate, John and Paula decided to seek help. They consulted a paranormal expert who confirmed that the house was indeed haunted by a vengeful spirit. He suggested performing a protection ritual to try to calm the spirit and free the house from the curse. On the night of the ritual, the family gathered in the living room, surrounded by candles and protective objects. The expert began chanting ancient incantations, trying to communicate with the spirit. However, as the ritual progressed, the atmosphere in the house grew increasingly heavy. The candles flickered violently, and dark shadows moved across the walls. At the height of the ritual, the spirit finally manifested. A spectral figure of a woman appeared in the center of the room, her empty eyes fixed on the family. She began to scream, a mix of pain and rage, causing the windows to shatter and the furniture to move on its own. John, holding Paula's hand, begged for mercy, promising to leave the house if the spirit allowed them to leave safely. The spirit hesitated for a moment before letting out one last deafening scream and disappearing. The house fell silent, but the air was charged with a sense of imminent danger. The expert, pale and trembling, told the family they needed to leave immediately, as the ritual had not been enough to calm the spirit. The Johnson family began packing their things quickly, trying to leave the house before something worse happened. However, as they approached the exit door, the supernatural manifestations intensified. Doors slammed violently, and an invisible force seemed to push them back into the house. Sophie and Peter were in a panic, crying and holding tightly to their parents' hands. With one last effort, John managed to open the door, and the family ran outside without looking back. They got into the car and drove as fast as they could, leaving the cursed house behind. Even after leaving the House of Nightmares, the Johnson family realized they were not completely free. Recurring nightmares haunted their dreams, and the feeling of being watched continued to follow them. Peter began having visions of the spectral woman at his new school. And Sophie heard whispers at night, even miles away from the house. The family tried to resume a normal life, but the presence of the vengeful spirit seemed to have latched onto them. Every attempt to start anew was sabotaged by inexplicable and terrifying events. The House of Nightmares had left a permanent mark on their lives, and they knew they could never completely escape its curse. The House of Nightmares was empty again, but not for long. Soon, a new family interested in the property bought the house at a surprisingly low price. The Johnsons tried to warn them about the dangers, but were ignored. Just like them, the new residents were about to discover that the house of their dreams was, in fact, a gateway to the worst nightmares. Want part 2 of this story? Leave it in the comments. If you have a horror story and want to see it published on our channel, send us your story.